grumpy 3-year-old, and his mother took a little bit longer to get here because it's snowing outside. But the good news is if you're joining us live on camera, you don't have to worry about traveling out in the snow. It is snowing a little bit out there. We finally just heard the first plows. We're going to be in the book of Daniel this week. It's our 8th lesson on Daniel, but we'll be reading through chapter 9. Psalm 119, as I remind everybody every week, longest chapter in the Bible. Acrostic poem. This is built on the Hebrew letter Zayin. Looks like I'm just saying.
Remember your word to your servant, in which you have made me hope.
Very good, Hannah.
This is my comfort in my affection, that you promise gives me life.
Very good. All right, Paul.
The insolent, you
Utterly. Deride me.
But I do not turn away from your law.
When I think of your rules from of old, I take comfort, O Lord. Hot indignation seizes me because of the wicked who forsake your law.
Ricky.
Hi, your statues have been my songs in the house of sorting.
My sojourning.
Oh, yeah. Sojourning. I remember your name in the night, O Lord, and keep your law.
This blessing has fallen to me that I have kept your precepts. It's kind of sad that I don't have a camera. The face is in here, but right now I'm speaking to a completely empty house except for my 13-year-old son Jacob and the dog. Everybody else left the room.
Just read it without them.
But we're going to get going anyway. We're in the 9th chapter of Daniel. And we're going to be listening to Daniel chapter 9, verses 1 through 7.
Daniel 9. In the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, by descent a Mede, who was made king over the realm of the Chaldeans, in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, perceived in the books the number of years that, according to the word of the Lord to Jeremiah the prophet, must pass before the end of the desolations of Jerusalem, namely 70 years. Then I turned my face to the Lord God, seeking him by prayer and pleas for mercy with fasting and sackcloth and ashes. I prayed to the Lord my God, and made confession, saying, O Lord, the great and awesome God, who keeps covenant, and steadfast love with those who love him, and keep his commandments. We have sinned, and done wrong, and acted wickedly, and rebelled, turning aside from your commandments and rules. We have not listened to your servants the prophets, who spoke in your name to our kings, our princes, and our fathers, and to all the people of the land. To you, O Lord, belongs righteousness, but to us open shame, as at this day to the men of Judah, to the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and to all Israel, those who are near and those who are far away, in all the lands to which you have driven them, because of the treachery that they have committed against you.
All right. The king that they mention here is, well, Darius, son of Ahasuerus. We heard about Darius the Mede back in chapter 6. He was the king for Daniel and the lion's den. he was the Median king of the kingdom at the same time as there was a Persian king. Ahasuerus and Darius were most likely throne names. And the example I give is the Pope. When the Pope takes power, Pope John Paul II, his real name was Karl Wojtyla. He was a Polish man. He took the Pope or regal name of John Paul II. So Darius and Ahasuerus were probably throne names. They passed along. Those weren't their original names. Daniel speaks of Jeremiah. Jeremiah was a prophet that preached and spoke before Daniel did. He preached 22 years before Daniel did. He witnessed different things than Daniel did. Daniel was a prophet in exile in Babylon. Jeremiah stayed in Jerusalem the entire time. Some of Jeremiah's letters, it says later on in the book, he sent them to the exiles that were outside of the land of Jerusalem. So the exiles in Egypt, Jewish people living in Babylon. Daniel would have seen Jeremiah's letters. So when it says that Daniel perceived, at the very beginning of the reading, it's talking about Daniel read Jeremiah's prophecy. The actual prophecy is here. Let's see. So, Israel and Judah were two kingdoms that God had set up. He actually had set them up as one. Long story, they ended up splitting into two, and they didn't listen to God's rules. The kingdom of Israel was destroyed by the Assyrians in 722 BC. Now, if we think back, this was around the time of Jonah. So when the kingdom of Israel was destroyed, it was around the time of the prophet Jonah. Judah, the kingdom of Judah, was sent into captivity around the time of Daniel, 605 BC, about 120 years later. So the Jeremiah prophecy says, "This whole land shall become a ruin and a waste, and these nations shall serve the king of Babylon for 70 years." Jeremiah 25:11. So it's a two-part prophecy. The kingdom shall be a ruin and a waste, and they shall serve the king of Babylon. So, when it says that it will serve the king of Babylon, this is when Daniel was sent to Babylon from Judah at the very beginning of the book of Daniel. We read about this. Do we remember who the king was at this time?
Nebuchadnezzar.
Our old megalomaniacal friend, Nebuchadnezzar.
Nebuchadnezzar.
Shoot. Well, that one I'm not as
Huh?
worried about.
Oh.
Which one are you looking at? Facebook's not supposed to be on a camera.
Hey, handle.
No.
Come on, around. Yeah, oh, you
Okay. For 70 years,
know
shouldn't be.
Can we get on with it, please?
So around this time, Nebuchadnezzar was the king of Babylon that sent the Jews into exile, and how Daniel ended up. In 536 BC, Cyrus was the king of Persia, and he made a decree that is called the Cyrus Cylinder. The Cyrus Cylinder kind of looked like an ear of corn, if you ask me.
Oh, God.
Hannah, calm down, honey.
Longest had a lot of things in it, like
Well,
while reading.
One of the things that it wrote about was that all of the displaced people in the empire would be repatriated, which means they'd be allowed to go back to where they came from, and all the temples that were destroyed would be restored. So the decree was made in 536 BC, which was the first year of Cyrus of Persia. Honey, it's not coming in off the camera. The Facebook, it's probably because you don't have the feed open. That's the Twitter feed. You're looking at two different things. Okay? If the return started exactly 1 year after the decree was made, it would be exactly 70 years that the Jews were in captivity in Babylon. So the ruin and a waste comes a little bit later. So there's like I said, there are two different prophecies. For 70 years, they're in captivity. The ruin and a waste is talking about the temple. The temple was destroyed by that guy with a funny name that looks like Nebuchadnezzar in 586 BC, and it was rebuilt by Zerubbabel. There's a whole book in the Bible, not named Zerubbabel, but it talks about what Zerubbabel did in 516 BC. So from 586 to 516 is also 70 years. Daniel was reading through Jeremiah's prophecies about how everything would be a ruin and a waste, and they would serve the king for 70 years. And when Darius the Mede took over, it was close to 536 BC, Daniel knew that the end was in sight. So Daniel prays a prayer of atonement. He says, the Jewish people screwed up and turned away. This wasn't our first time doing it, though. The Jewish people were famous for this throughout the Bible. And that they did not listen to the prophets. So Jesus said, all the time, he reminded the people that they did not listen to the prophets, that a prophet was never welcomed in his home city. So the things that they came and tried to warn the Jewish people about weren't heeded. This happened all the way through the time of Jesus. The prophets were never welcomed. Now we'll be moving to Daniel chapter 9, verses 8 through 15.
Oh, is this our favorite reading?
To us, O Lord, belongs open shame, to our kings, to our princes, and to our fathers, because we have sinned against you. To the Lord our God belong mercy and forgiveness. For we have rebelled against him, and have not obeyed the voice of the Lord our God by walking in his laws, which he set before us by his servants the prophets. All Israel has transgressed your law, and turned aside, refusing to obey your voice. And the curse and oath that are written in the law of Moses, the servant of God, have been poured out upon us because we have sinned against him. He has confirmed his words, which he spoke against us, and against our rulers who ruled us, by bringing upon us a great calamity. For under the whole heaven there has not been done anything like what has been done against Jerusalem. As it is written in the law of Moses, all this calamity has come upon us, yet we have not entreated the favor of the Lord our God, turning from our iniquities, and gaining insight by your truth. Therefore the Lord has kept ready the calamity, and has brought it upon us. For the Lord our God is righteous in all the works that he has done, and we have not obeyed his voice. And now, O Lord our God, who brought your people out of the land of Egypt with a mighty hand, and have made a name for yourself, as at this day we have sinned, we have done wickedly.
So more of the same. He goes on, you know, Lord, you are great. We are worthless. The prophets weren't listened to by us or by our rulers. And the curse and oath that are written in the law of Moses. So in verse 11, Daniel talks about the curse and oath that are written in the law of Moses. So in Leviticus chapter 26, verse 27, it says, "But if in spite of this you will not listen to me, but walk contrary to me," so this is God speaking to the Israelites, "then I will walk contrary to you in fury, and I myself will discipline you sevenfold for your sins. And I will scatter you among the nations, and I will unsheathe the sword after you, and your land shall be a desolation, and your cities shall be a waste." So the prophecy in Jeremiah, it talks about the land being a desolation and a waste, and the people being in captivity. And all the way back here in Leviticus, before the nation of Israel even existed, God warned them that if you don't do what I want you to do and obey the laws and be good people, I'm going to send you into captivity, and I'm going to destroy your city and temple. So way back here in Leviticus, we have captivity foretold thousands of years before Daniel lived through it. Daniel 9, chapter 9, verses 16 through 19. It's more prayer. It's not it just doesn't add anything new. So we'll move on to 9, 20 through 27.
Daddy, don't mess things up this time.
Vows here, not unto my, because your soul are called by your name. While I was speaking and praying, confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, and presenting my plea before the Lord my God for the holy hill of my God, while I was speaking in prayer, the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision at the first, came to me in swift flight at the time of the evening sacrifice. He made me understand, speaking with me and saying, "O Daniel, I have now come out to give you insight and understanding. At the beginning of your pleas for mercy a word went out, and I have come to tell it to you, for you are greatly loved. Therefore consider the word and understand the vision. 70 weeks are decreed about your people and your holy city to finish the transgression, to put an end to sin, and to atone for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal both vision and prophet, and to anoint a most holy place. Know therefore and understand that from the going out of the word to restore and build Jerusalem to the coming of an anointed one, a prince, there shall be 7 weeks. Then for 62 weeks it shall be built again with squares and moat, but in a troubled time. And after the 62 weeks an anointed one shall be cut off, and shall have nothing. And the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Its end shall come with a flood, and to the end there shall be war. Desolations are decreed, and he shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week, and for half of the week he shall put an end to sacrifice and offering. And on the wing of abomination shall come one who makes desolate, until the decreed end is poured out on the desolator."
So last chapter, when Daniel was having the vision of the ram and the goat, Gabriel came and explained the vision to him. That same thing is happening here. Gabriel comes in and is going to explain Daniel's vision to him. The actual word, so Gabriel comes in and says 70 weeks are decreed for your people. The actual word that Daniel uses was 77s. It's a week of years, or 7 years. Daniel says there'll be 70 7-year periods. Your people in the holy city. So this prophecy is about the Jews. It accomplishes 6 things. It finishes transgression. Now transgression is willfully doing what is wrong. It ends it. There'll be no more of it. It puts an end to sin. Now sin is missing the mark of what God's holy law is. It ends sin. It atones for iniquity. So iniquity is long. If you're transgressing, doing what is wrong for a very, very long time, you have iniquity. It brings in everlasting righteousness. These 70 weeks are important. Very important. It seals both vision and prophet, and it anoints a most holy place. So sin and wrongdoing are completely gone. There will be no more prophecies because everything will be perfect. The time period that Daniel was talking about is he's seeing a vision of what happens at the very end of the world, where everything will be perfect and Jesus will rule. Daniel doesn't know that it's Jesus yet. So what happens is, think of a prophecy time clock of 490 years.
Jeepers.
It's broken down into a few different pieces. So the first one, the word to restore and build Jerusalem. So it starts, this 490 years starts with the word to restore and build Jerusalem. Now earlier we saw the decree from Cyrus. That's not this. This word to restore and build Jerusalem lasts for 7 weeks. It's 49 years. We still have 63 weeks later. This happened in 445 BC under King Artaxerxes. And you read about him in the book of Nehemiah. King of Persia, Artaxerxes. The second subdivision of these 70 weeks, Jerusalem will be built again with squares and a moat, but it'll be a troubled time. So this is 62 weeks, 434 years. They will take Jerusalem and they will build it. It's going to be a troubled time. The temple will be there. That only leaves, for those of us that are counting, 1 week or 7 years left. The initial order to rebuild finished up over the next 434 years. It was a troubled time for the Jewish people. The Persians were there first. Then the Greeks came in, which led to Antiochus Epiphanes. And then the Romans came in and desolated the land. The Jews had it hard for these 434 years. Jerusalem was rebuilt, like the prophecy said, but it wasn't peachy. So, with a Jewish calendar of 360 days in a year, 483 years after 445 BC brings us to AD 30. An anointed one shall be cut off and shall have nothing. So, what bad happened to someone anointed in AD 30? Can anybody think of who this person might be? Crickets from the gallery. Jesus!
Jesus.
This prophecy here was talking directly about Jesus. He will cut off and have nothing. He will be crucified. This atones for iniquity. So, in the past, the Jews had 1 day a year when the high priest would go in and he would atone and make right everybody's bad sin. But the priest could only do this once a year. What Jesus did is he got rid of all sins one time through his crucifixion on the cross. So Daniel, way back here in the 500s BC, long before Jesus,
30 was a while ago.
yes, AD 30 was a long time ago. It's almost 2,000 years ago. But 500 years before that, Daniel wrote this prophecy saying exactly when Jesus would come, and Jesus did. So, the prophecy says, the people of the prince who is to come, so the prince who is to come is the Antichrist, not Jesus. The people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the temple. And in AD 70, so 70 AD, the Romans came in, they completely destroyed the Jewish temple, and they, in here, on something called the Arch of Titus, in Rome, we actually have pictures of them taking the things that were in the Jewish temple out. So this happened. This is documented. So the people of the prince who is to come, meaning the Antichrist, is a citizen, well, will be a citizen of the Roman Empire. Which is something we've talked about a couple times. The Roman Empire destroyed the city of Jerusalem and the sanctuary. So this gives us further identification of who the Antichrist is. In one vision, it was a feet of iron and clay. In another vision, it was 10 horns on the great beast. The people of the prince. So we can say with certainty that we know of what kind of nationality the Antichrist will be. It will be of the Roman Empire. But the Roman Empire, when it was here, was huge. It had all kinds of people who lived in it, so that doesn't give us too much. Maybe he was Spanish. Maybe he was Italian.
Who knows?
He could have even been Romanian. Anyway.
Is Romanian a way different language?
Romanian is different than English, yeah. Yes, it is. So right now, we have the prophecy time clock on pause since Jesus' death. 483 years, or 69 weeks, have passed. Next, the prophecy time clock talks about the Antichrist that is coming. When does this happen? And he shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week. He being the prince who is to come, the Antichrist. His strong covenant is a peace treaty for 7 years. We know when the end is very, very near, when the Antichrist makes a peace treaty with a lot of people for 7 years. Half the week, or 3.5 years, he will end all sacrifices and offerings in the temple. We heard of another ruler that did this. It was Antiochus Epiphanes in the last chapter. He talked about a very, very bad man who did terrible things to Jewish people.
Quick question.
Yes?
If they were like billions of years ago, how is it 2010?
Well, it's because it's divided into different things. Time was counted differently before Christ in BC and after the Lord in AD. We are in the AD. Very good question. On the wing of abominations shall come one who makes desolate. It's poetic. It either means that the Antichrist stands in a defiled wing of the temple, or maybe it's a metaphor saying that an abomination is a bird with wings.
I'm not trying to be rude, but are we almost done?
Until the decreed end is poured out on the desolator. What this is telling us is that even though the Antichrist will come in and do terrible things, it means that God is still in control. The end is poured out on him. The whole time, God is in control. But the important thing to remember is that the Antichrist has all these things that he's going to do that are terrible, but there has to be a temple standing in Jerusalem for the Antichrist to come. Is there a Jewish temple standing right now? And the answer is no. The temple is not there. Right now, the Temple Mount looks like this, with the Dome of the Rock Mosque, Al-Aqsa Mosque.
It looks like a bell.
Muslims like doing stuff like that.
So the Muslims actually control the area where the Jewish temple is supposed to go. So for right now, until much further into the future, the Antichrist can't come, because there's no temple for him to defile. And that is where we will end. But these 70 weeks are important. And right now, we're waiting for the last one.
When is it going to be the last one?
No one knows.
Well, God tells us that nobody knows when it's going to happen. it's only for him to know. But there are some things that point us to it can't happen anytime soon because there's no temple there. You know, if the Antichrist has to sit in the temple